Kia ora tātou, nau mai, haere mai. Welcome to Council meeting of Wednesday the 5th of May 2021. And we are being recorded, this meeting. It's on our Council's website. It's being live streamed. So kia ora to those online. I'll just explain the health and safety procedures in a fire or the unlikely event of a fire or emergency. We exit through the green sign doors and we evacuate to the assembly area, which is directly in front of us here, the clock tower and the square Te Marae Hine. In terms of health and safety, obviously a non-smoking facility. A defibrillator is located in the front of house on the ground floor. And our toilets are in the link span as people entered. Councillors and anybody presenting, if I could just ask you to say your name as you speak for those online. Right, we'll go to our order paper. We haven't got a huge agenda today. So apologies. I have not received any apologies. Hopefully there's nobody leaving early, because will be early. Notification of additional items. Again, I haven't received any as well. Declarations of interest. I haven't received any of those either. And we move to number 4, which is the confirmation of the minutes of our ordinary meeting. Councillor. Could you use the microphone? All right, so back to number 4, confirmation of the minutes. Council resolves that the minutes of the Council meeting of the 28th of April 2021, Part 1, public, be confirmed as a true and correct record. I'll look to move those, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. I'll open it up if there are any matters arising. There being none, we will vote. Thank you. That is passed 15 votes for with 1 abstention. Is that coming up? Okay, look, we can get that out. We have a few technical glitches here. All right, we'll move through to the reports. And these are somewhat academic, but we have number 5, which is an amendment to standing orders for committee quorum. And we have a memo there on page 15 from our governance manager, Hannah. I'll take that as being read. So it is the amendment to the standing orders, and just reminding councillors that we do need a 12 for this to pass. That the Council resolves to amend Standing Orders 3.4.5, which is definition of a quorum for Council and committee meetings. So it additionally reads, except Committee of Council, this Council, meetings for the month of May 2021. And that's for to get through our hearings, as there is a number of other Council events at the same time. So I'll look to move that, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. I'll open it up for any comments. Are there any questions of? There are, okay. Okay, I'll open it up. Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Hannah. Just the question was any consideration given to changing standing orders to accommodate this type of alteration for potential other times that this might be needed, as opposed to just addressing it for one specific month of 1 year?
Thank you, Councillor Naylor. Through you, Mr Mayor. Yes, there was. At this stage, I'm recommending that we just do it for this year, but I would like to consider a longer-term solution when we look at the standing orders for the next triennium.
Thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Hannah. Changing from like 8 of us around at a minimum required to 2 of us around at a minimum required is quite a jump, and I think if there was only 2 of us, could look a bit empty. Was there consideration of sort of intermediate steps in there, or ways to ensure that we might have a higher level of attendance?
At this stage, with discussions with the chairs, we're expecting at least 6 members to attend these hearings, but preferably more. Everyone's obviously invited at all times and can also watch the proceedings afterwards on the recording. The legislation itself sets out 2 as being sufficient. I would not expect this membership to not turn up, so I don't have concerns about that. Thus, it was, let's just use the legislation as the minimum, but expecting that more will, of course, be interested and want to attend.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I guess on the same lines as Councillor Barrett, with the number being 2, and it's still possible for us to move a recommendation that has a higher number between 2, and so thank you. I just want that confirmed. Thank you.
Sorry, just for the recording, because I nodded, yes, it's absolutely possible that councillors today decide on a minimum number.
All right, that's exhausted the questions. Thank you, Hannah. So I'll come back to the resolution that we've got on the screen, and I won't read it again, but I'll open it up for any comments now. All right. Yep. Sorry, Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I would just like to, whatever the number, I'd like to have it stated in the recommendation, just so there's no question around what's referred to. It says that the quorum be what it is in the standing orders, but except for, and I think we should say stating it is 2, or whatever number we decide. Personally, I'd prefer it was higher than 2. I've been in a term of council where at a hearing we only had 2 members attending. Unfortunately, I was not one of them, but I did hear the feedback from the submitter, one of the several that were in that session, quite almost offended that there was only 2 members sitting in at the table for the submission after the amount of effort that people had made to present. And I wouldn't want us to repeat that experience. And so therefore having consideration of a higher number for me would be much more preferable. And even for this May rather than in future considerations. So for my mind, I'm happy to put in an addition or an amendment to what's been moved that and even let's make it 3 in my mind, so without making too much conflict in the decision making, but to state that the quorum be 3. Thank you, Mr Mayor, and ask for a seconder.
Okay, have we got that? Have the officers got that? Right, we better get that up. It's an amendment. Just wait for that to come up. As councillors know, you'll have seen it's obviously 5 and 6 is the minimum. I'd expect that in the history of this council has been much higher. So, okay, does anybody else want to speak to this amendment? Does, sorry, Councillor Johnson, you want to speak to this?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Was it showing up? Because it says that I'm in the queue, but I did.
Yeah, it did show up, but
Okay.
sorry, you didn't. I thought you were speaking to the substantive.
No, I just have a question really as to the mover, I suppose, as to why 3. Because it's not. I just wonder what the rationale is around 3. Let's rather than say 4 or 5, or I think we've got, how many have we got rostered on for each one?
6, my
So
understanding.
could we make it 6? Just, those are the questions.
It's a rationale that hasn't had a lot of thought. I just think 2's way too low because of the experience that I shared. 3 is next step up. That's kind of setting the bar somewhat higher than just kind of going from basic. I'd prefer it higher, but I don't want to conflict the extension of the debate, because I think along the lines of what the Mayor's shared, I believe that we'll have them fairly well attended, and maybe the number is, I think it's important, but not necessarily the target is probably, it's the minimum benchmark. So if you want to go higher, it's a personal preference. I'm just going for majority of councillors because it needs a majority of at least 12 members, and I don't want to conflict that to make it succeed. Thank you.
Okay. We did have a seconder there for the amendment, Councillor Naylor. Okay. So is there anybody else that wants to comment on this amendment before I go back to Councillor Dennison? Do you want to write a reply? No. Okay. All right, councillors. We have the amendment there in red. We'll vote on that first. Could vote, please. And that has passed 16 votes for and none against. We'll now go to the substantive. All right, if we could vote on this substantive, thanks.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I wanted to comment on the substantive motion. I hadn't commented on the other thing.
Okay, all right, can we stop the vote, please? Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did just want to reflect on the comments made in bringing the amendment that it has been the practice of this council to turn up en masse for the hearing of submissions to our annual and long-term plans. And I think it is to the credit of this council that has been the way that things have gone in the past. But this year does look very different in that it's been a very busy period of time for elected members and for officers. And also that during the time when we're holding our submissions hearing, the city is hosting the Economic Development New Zealand conference, which has a number of elected members in attendance, as is appropriate when our city is hosting a conference. And so I wouldn't normally be in favour of us accepting that there would be fewer people here than maybe, as Councillor Dennison said, the community has come to expect and is probably right to expect. But this year there do seem to be very good reasons why this change is appropriate.
Okay, one final time. Is anybody else that would like to comment? Sorry, I missed that. Okay, great. We will vote, please. And that has passed 16 votes for and none against. Right, councillors, we'll move to number 6, which is the appointment of council representative to the Victoria Esplanade User Group. Again, a memo there from our Governance Manager, Hannah White. I'll take it as being read, and it's on page 19 of your papers, and it's around Council resolving that Councillor Billy Meehan be appointed as the Council representative on the Victoria Esplanade User Group for the remainder of the 2019-2022 triennium. Obviously, Councillor Meehan is the new Play, Sport and Rec Chair, and that role has normally fallen to that person, hence the need for the change. Got questions? Councillor Beattie.
Actually, it's an amendment, so I'll wait till you've...
Okay. The Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Hannah. Can you just explain why we are appointing Councillor Meehan rather than appointing the Chair of Sport, as we've always understood that position to be filled by that person? But could you just explain that?
Certainly at the beginning of this triennium, a paper came to the Council which was confirmed by resolution, and it listed a number of individuals to appointments on external groups. Some of those appointments were made by position, and some were made by the name of the individual councillor. This is a case where it was that Councillor Harbetter was named as the individual who happened to be the chair of Play, Rec and Sport, and it was appropriately associated in that way. But the position was not allocated to the chair of that committee. Thus, we're in a similar situation. So we were replacing like for like, but the intention is that when we make these appointments to external bodies in the next triennium, that as much as possible we make them to the position rather than the individual.
So we'll be tidying that up in future, but for now it's actually an individual elected member that's appointed to this.
Through you, Mr Mayor, yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, following on same lines, Hannah, I'm just noting that in the terms of reference for the user group, the membership of the group includes specified PNCC councillor as selected by the Mayor. So what will be the process for amending the terms of reference to identify the chair of Play, Sport and Rec?
Can I ask a GM to answer that? I'm not familiar with this group.
Yeah, my recollection is the terms of reference are approved through council, so there would need to be a report that comes back that updates the terms of reference.
Would that happen in the normal triennium arrangements?
I think that would be appropriate, yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, are there any further questions? Okay, so we've got the resolution there that Councillor Billy Meehan be appointed the council representative on the Victoria Esplanade User Group for the remainder of the 2019-2022 triennium. I'm quite happy to move that, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. I'll open it up for any comment. All right, we'll vote, please. It's 15-4, one abstention. Thank you. Right, we move through to page 25 of our papers, which is number 7, which is our council work schedule. And I'll open it up for any comments or questions. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Just around item 6, which is the Manawatu residence card, that's been outstanding for a year and we've still got no date on it. Could we have some kind of timeline, please?
Yes, you can. Probably not at this meeting, but I will, now that we have got more a resolution around our structure, and we now have somebody that is a second-tier who's now responsible for this area, or will be permanently. I'll have a discussion with her and we'll come back with a projected timeline. So my apologies for that. Can I also say there may be some here that do have the TBC beside them, that now that we have people in place, that we will come back and confirm those timelines.
Thank you.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Could I seek a comment on item 1 coming off the work schedule, please?
I'll just get our governance manager to
Thank you.
comment.
Through Mr Mayor, thank you for your question. We received only one remit this year directly to this council, and it actually passed through Zone 3 and was accepted by the zone, so no longer required our support.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have the council work schedule there that we resolved to receive it, dated May 2021. I'll look to move it, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Any further comments before we vote? There being none, we will vote. Thank you. That has passed 16 votes for and none against. We now move to recommendations from committee meetings, and I'll ask the chair of our Finance and Audit Committee, Councillor Beattie, to speak to that.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move the Part 1 Finance and Audit Committee recommendations from the 28th of April be approved. I'm happy to move the Part 2, but if there's any discussion, we need to go into...
that's very good, because really, if we could do it all at once, that would be probably the preference, but if there is a member that doesn't want to do that, then I respect the...
If the Part 2 could be separated, I wouldn't vote and step back from the vote.
Yeah, I can separate. So we'll do, and then I'll do the second one.
Okay, so look, it's been moved, seconded by Councillor Naylor. This is Part 1 we're talking about, and that Council resolves to adopt, let's get back to the recommendations there, which is Clause 2921, Ashurst Domain Scout Hall Lease Proposal, Recommendations 1-2, and then Clause 3021, Otera Park Personal Pony Club Branch Lease Proposal, Recommendations 1-2, from the Finance and Audit Committee meeting of the 28th of April 2021. Moved by the Chair and the Deputy Chair. Are there any matters arising from those? There being none, we will vote on this, please. And has passed 15 votes for with 1 abstention. We will now, I'll ask you, Councillor Beattie, to move the minutes of Part 2.
Okay. So I'm happy to move the Part 2 Confidential Finance and Audit Committee recommendations from the 28th of April meeting be approved.
Okay, and that is seconded by... thank you, Councillor Naylor.
Mr Mayor, just for the public record, I declare a conflict of interest in this Part 2 item, and because of my involvement with Homes for People, and withdraw from taking part on the vote. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we have the council recommendation there to accept these minutes. Clause 3721, Tamakuku, Terrace Expressions of Interest, Response to Affordable Housing Options, Recommendations 1-3, and this is obviously from the Finance and Audit Committee meeting, Part 2, 28th of April 2021. Moved by the Chair and Deputy Chair, and we will vote, please.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, just a point of order. because we're passing part 2, this is probably a question for our legal counsel, because we're passing a part 2 resolution in part 1, we're not disclosing or releasing the decision or the rationale, but this meeting is being recorded, so therefore the rationale for people's vote, etc., can't be documented. I'm just wondering whether this process is...
We've done it before.
For recommendations? I know we passed minutes.
We've passed minutes, yeah.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't believe that there's any issue here. We've done it before. I don't think that there's any debate or anything that is actually being disclosed.
All right. I believe everyone's voted, have they? I'm not sure. Okay, that has passed 13 votes for with 2 abstentions. All right. That has now completed the meeting, so I'll declare the meeting closed. Thank you, councillors. We will have a cup of tea and